Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude. Our topic is Palestinian life in Israel. And we have two special guests, Dr. Hatim Kana'aneh and Dolores Kana'aneh. Welcome to the show and thank you for coming to talk to us about a very important topic, really timely as well. So before we go any further, why don't you introduce yourself more, like where you come from, your connections to the islands and all that?
Well, I'm a local girl, really, born and raised in Honolulu, and went to Thomas Jefferson Elementary School, so that people out there who went with me remember, and went to intermediate school at Central and Kamakee High School, graduated, and then went to the UH. And my name is Dolores Agnes St. Morris, which now nobody would recognize because everybody calls me Dee Dee. It's an easier way of, of getting it around.
Yeah.
And I met Hatim at the university, and that changed my life.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really, because you just uprooted and left for another.
It was a very
yeah.
it was very, very different because he had told me beforehand that we were going to his home village and we would be living there and what it would be like and about his family. But you know, it's one thing is hearing it, and another thing really going there and seeing it. It was very different. It was more than I expected. But at the same time, I think, you know.
Yeah, you made a commitment.
Yeah, we were a different generation also. I think today's women, my daughter-in-law has no intentions of following my footsteps. And, but we decided that this is where we're going to live and we're going to make our life and we're going to make a change, hopefully.
Most commendable, in fact. And Dr. Hatim, how did you get to meet Dolores and tell us about your background as well.
Okay, I grew up in a village, a Palestinian village in northern Palestine, which became in 1948 northern Israel, when the state of Israel was established. And we are the minority of the Palestinians who for one reason or the other could not and did not leave their homes and become refugees. So we were the lucky ones. And after I, actually my family had to sell land to put me and two of my brothers, two older brothers, through high school. And then I was the first in the village to strike out and seek education abroad. I came to the United States, started in South Dakota in a small place called Yankton, Yankton, South Dakota. And then I met my good friend Dijon Lim, who is a Christian Chinese from Indonesia. So another misfit. And we became very good friends. And we just couldn't take the cold weather in South Dakota. We decided to come to the University of Hawaii. So we moved over here, and I got my BA in chemistry here at Bilger Hall from the UH. And this is where I met my wife. And then I continued, went on to study medicine and got my degree at Harvard. In the meantime, we got married, and she put me through medical school, essentially, because she was a teacher. And then I did my Master of Public Health as a preparation for a specialty in public health. Came back to the islands, did an internship at Queens Medical Center, and then left it all and went back home to work in the village where I grew up. And I was the first physician there, actually, in a region of about 40,000 people. There were some clinics in the morning where a doctor would come from the city and do 4 hours of work in the morning for members of the health maintenance organization to which workers only, workers on salary, belonged. And at any rate, after that, for the rest of the day and the night, I was the only primary health care provider for about 40,000 people. That was really, really a very demanding job. And then essentially came back for 2 years, 1976 and 1978 to 1978, and I joined the Kaiser Permanente medical group and worked out of the Ko'olau Clinic in Kaneohe for 2 years. Then again went back and stuck it out till now. But that's a very special story as well, why we came back in 1976, that maybe we can tell later.
Right. So that's like the local connection is very important, and the relationship between here and
Indeed.
Israel, Palestine as well. Didi, I also understand you studied for a master's in public health.
Yes, I did.
Well.
That was afterwards. I had my bachelor's in education from the University of Hawai'i, and then later on in 1985, I went back and got my master's of public health at Hadassah in Israel, a special program that they had for foreign students. I thought I could be of more help and understand what Hatim was doing more, and perhaps could be of more of help during those times.
Yeah, I'm curious about your experience there, like in general. I mean, someone who's, left Hawaii for Israel, Palestine, and then how did you, what kind of experiences you had, like if you give us an example or two?
Oh, wow. Okay, 1970. Hawaii was developed. We had electricity, we had telephones, we had everything, modern conveniences. And we went back to Israel, and the village is, I guess you would call it like foothills. They're not really mountains of the Galilee. They're not really high. They're more like foothills. And we traveled from Haifa, the port where we came into, and we went up to the village. It was a dirt road, pretty much. It just barely fit one car. And the whole family came down to greet us, and that was overwhelming from the word go. All of these people, so many, came down to see us. They were so happy, that Hatim had come back, and they took us up there. They were very loving and very kind and everything, but we got to the village, and at the time there were 6,000 people. It was a much smaller village. Today there are about 20,000, 21,000. So it's grown quite a bit. And we had no electricity, we had no telephones.
But Israel is modern state.
That's it. That's the cities. Yeah. Not the Palestinian villages.
Not the
Palestinian
How
villages.
about like Israeli kibbutz?
They have it before they even start going. Right. Yeah. And around us during the years that we were there, they began with settlements in our area. And for them, and we still didn't have electricity. We still didn't have telephones, and they would give them everything beforehand. They made sure that they had even basketball courts for their kids with lights to play. When our kids had nothing and we didn't have lights. And it was very difficult to see and to feel. We didn't have so much. And we didn't even have a road when they began to put in a 14-kilometer long road, two lanes, to connect one settlement, one Jewish settlement, with the next one, bypassing our village and all the two other villages in the area, just so that they could connect each other when we still had dirt roads, essentially.
So
it's difficult to see these things going on.
So the Palestinians and the Jews are separate and unequal, basically.
Very
you
much
are
so.
saying,
Very much so. And I taught in the schools.
Experiences like in South Africa, for instance. But even worse, perhaps.
I can relate to that with South Africa because one of my fellow students in the MPH program was from South Africa, a black woman, Lucy. And she and two other friends, one from Thailand and one from Colombia, they came out to the village and they came by bus. And they had, we were in this program and they had been told about Israel, what the government tells about Israel. Then when they came out to the village, Lucy said to me, "This is worse than South Africa." And so it's amazing.
In fact, what I'm going to do, there is the Israeli writer Susan Nathan.
Yes, we know her.
You know her. She was here last year. And I want to show a segment of an interview I did with her last year when she was here. And it's interesting because she elected to live in an Arab village because she was like so much of a Zionist. But when her experiences in Israel showed her otherwise, she started criticizing her own government and so forth, and elected to stay in a Palestinian village.
Very
despite,
close to ours.
And despite all of these inconveniences that you're talking about, even though it was like later on in the 21st century. Yes.
Perhaps one item that most people don't realize is that within Israel, we, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, we make up about 20% of the population.
Right.
And what is important for people to know, for your audience to know, is that we live in separate, physically separate geographic areas. We live in segregated settlements. We live in villages where Jews don't live, and we are not allowed essentially to live in Jewish communities. So our communal life is very much separate.
Even in the cities, there are like Palestinian areas in cities, but not as much separation as it might be in the village. But there is that too.
There are slums in the cities, and in Jaffa, and in Led, and in Ramli, and in these slum areas are separated from the rest, from the better off neighborhoods by concrete walls with barbed wires. That's, you know, that's sort of...
we're talking 21st century.
We're talking 21st century. We're talking about Israeli citizens proper, not about the occupied Palestinian territories where the roads are separate and where there is a separation with a wall. This is within Israel proper.
This is in the area of Palestine where Israel was created in 1948.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so we'll watch that segment of Susan Nathan, and then we can comment more on that.
Alrighty.
I was brought up with the traditional Zionist thinking that Israel was developed as a country for my needs in time of trouble anywhere in the world. And the Palestinians just didn't figure in that equation at all. That was the way that I was educated. We had that traditional blue and white box in our home that we all put money into, which of course, you know, we were told then that it was for buying trees, but we thought that it was buying trees to cover land that was barren, and nobody actually even thought or dared to think that, heaven forbid, we might be planting on land that had belonged to somebody else. And why didn't we think that? We didn't think that because quite literally we were educated to think that the land was barren.
Yeah, so it's like the land without people for people without land.
Entirely.
I mean, this is,
Entirely. And now, when I think back on that education, I can't even begin to imagine how I was so brainwashed. But on the other hand, I look at my friends or my ex-friends in Britain, and I see that they're stuck in that. And that it's very much, I think, you know, to do with their security, that it's safer to go on to believing that rather than to do what I did, which meant that I built up my life on one set of values, which I thought were built on concrete, only to see that actually I built my values and my expectations on sand. And when I arrived in Israel over a period of 2 years, I saw the sandcastles collapse. And in fact, 7 years later, I've been 10 years in Israel now, but 7 years living in the Arab world. And I don't think there are any more sandcastles left to collapse. And you pay a price for that. I mean, I don't want to pretend to the world that it was an easy transition. It was not an easy transition. It seems now like it was very easy because the Arab world is my home. And in fact, I'm much more comfortable in the Arab world, in the Islamic world, than I am in the Western world. And why is that? That's because I see the similarities between Judaism and Islam. So I'm much more comfortable with the Islamic practices and way of life than I am with the Christian world, in which I don't find myself to be at ease with any of the practices. I can't relate to it.
Yeah. Would you say you come from an ethics based on Judaism as you understand it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think what has been the hardest thing for me being an Israeli citizen is finding that my religion is now my nationality. So it's not like in Britain where I'm British first and then my religion is Jewish, okay? Something that is quite minimal in comparison to my total British identity and citizenship. Now I find myself in a situation where, hey, I'm Jewish, as in my religion, but it's also my nationality, and it's because it's my nationality and my government's enacting policies that I don't agree with.
Yeah, I just wanted to play this because yes, these are things you can relate to, you folks, and it comes from someone who was a Zionist and then rejected Zionism because from her ethical position in terms of Jewish ethics and so forth. So I just wanted to say that. But the other thing is that you have written a book about those kinds of experiences that you've had in Israel, Palestine. So we have the book on the Elmo. We can show it as we are talking on. Yeah. So here is the book on the Elmo, a Doctor in Galilee. So could you tell us more about how you wrote it, why you wrote it, and some of the things, examples that you highlight in that book?
Of course, okay. But I do want to relate to what Susan
Absolutely,
said
yes,
first,
yes.
if you will
Yeah,
permit
sure,
me.
sure.
The fact that she mentioned about people donating so they plant trees in barren area and so on. What people don't realize is that in 1948, some 530 villages like mine, smaller, bigger, were totally demolished, emptied of their population, demolished, raised off the face of the earth, and their areas turned into national forest. That's where Susan's trees,
Yes,
where her money
that's
went
right.
to plant those national forests
Yeah.
on Palestinian destroyed villages. Now that's one point. I mean, Susan is our friend, and I know her, and I read her book, and I respect her highly. But back to my
Yes.
my own book, I did not sit down and write a book now. Actually, over the years, since I was in high school, I have kept kind of a memoir. Essentially, I would, anytime there was something that disturbed me, something that moved me highly, I would sit down and write about it, and then sort of get it off my conscience.
Yes.
And that turns out, after I became a doctor, I realized that psychiatrists use that as a form of psychotherapy. And that was my psychotherapy over the years. In fact, when I was really at the height of my career, I didn't have the time to write. And so I used to get up early in the morning before the children and Didi got up, and I would sit down and record on a tape recorder, just an audio record. I'll talk to myself for half an hour, for an hour, and then put it away. I never heard those tapes. I never read the material till I retired. And then I started looking at it, and there's a lot in it. And so I selected, out of that, I selected about maybe 25–30% of what I found in all of those, that collected material. And I selected pieces that had a social or political aspect to them. And that's what came out in the book of memoirs. And it is really more about life in rural Palestine within Israel. It is than it is about practicing medicine.
Yes.
But you know, the title had to have a doctor in it, and the fact is that I hope that if those who read the book will come out at the end with a feeling, not really detailed knowledge, but more of a feeling about what is it like to live as a Palestinian citizen in the state of Israel, the presumed only democracy in the Middle East, and the democracy and equality and so on. It is democracy. It is a true democracy for the Jews. It is definitely not a democracy for all of its citizens, and that is the problem. And as a matter of fact, currently, that problem is a very acute one, because the current government in Israel, including its foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, sees as part of its mission to essentially what they nicely call to transfer Palestinian citizens of Israel out of the country. So it is no longer criticized for people, for politicians to talk about how do we get rid of the Palestinians in Israel. I mean, it is at that level of racist statements.
Yeah.
And this is the Prime Minister and the
Foreign Minister.
Foreign Minister with whom, the U.S. Administration deals.
Yes. Yeah. It's very interesting. But Didi, about your particular experiences in terms of discrimination, we talked a little bit before, but could you give like some examples from like education, since you taught, or some other?
Well, let's go back to
example?
the very beginning.
Absolutely.
In 1970. In the Galilee area and in all of Israel, there were checkpoints wherever you would cross over, and they used what they called Haga, which is like a civil defense kind of thing, not really, not army,
Volunteers.
not police, but volunteers. And they were set up at different posts, and they would stop people going through. And when Hatim and I were alone in our car, we had brought back with us a Volkswagen camper. And whenever we went through, nobody would stop us because we could easily pass for a Jewish couple.
Especially if she's driving.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't think that it was an Arabic person, so we wouldn't get stopped. But if we had my sister-in-law, his older sister, any of my sister-in-laws, but especially Amti Fatmi, his older sister, might have been with me many times, and she wore the Arabic head cover, and I mean, all women did, older women did at the time. We would get stopped for sure. Where is your license? Where are you going? What, blah, everything else. If his brother, Ahmed, was with us, the same thing, we would get stopped. And even, not only were we stopped and questioned, and they would want to look at everything that we had, the papers, my license, but even when we were going once on a picnic, Ahmed was behind us with his children, and we were in front, and we both had cars that were filled with children because we wanted to take all the family together to the Sea of Galilee for that day. And so we had the limit +1, and the same with him. They looked at our car and they let us through. They looked at his car, and they pulled him over on the side and they gave him a ticket. And obviously, I mean, it's obvious to us why, what happened. I mean, it's so discriminatory.
Yeah.
And this is something that went on wherever we went. And I don't know whether Hatim remembers that, but once he was going to the hospital in Nahariya to see a patient, to visit a patient that was there. And again, they had this man, this civil servant, Haga, standing there. He lifts the barrier there so that you can go through or not. And Hatim has a sign on his car saying that he was a physician, and physicians the gate gets open and they're let in. And Hatim waited, and and the man looked at him, and Hatim waited, and so Hatim leaned out and said, you can see I'm a physician. Could you please open that for me? He says, oh, no, I'm not going to open the gate. I'm only here to scare Arabs. I mean, he really said that in Arabic. He thought Hatim.
And he said, I don't know how this gate opens. I mean, the man went away. But I stand here just to scare Arabs.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
his
to the point of
definition of his job.
ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I
The
taught in the
issue
schools of
yeah.
education. I taught in the schools. And I've also taught in Boston before going there. And in Boston, I taught in the Roxbury area, which was a slum area. So I had experience there. And until today, the Arabic schools receive much less in terms of funding when they should be receiving equal, but they don't. And the situation in the schools is like you were going into a slum area where the classrooms are not well set up, laboratories don't exist for the children. Textbooks, they have to buy their own textbooks, which is fine if everybody in the country had to, but in the Jewish schools in the cities, they're provided with their textbooks to use for the year, whereas our children have to buy their textbooks. Teachers...
Statistics, just to add to that, about, you see, the government subsidizes the educational system. It pays per head. And if you... And it's all done using laws and regulations that are worked in such finesse and in such ways that, you know, it is democracy and we have our democratic ways. But at the end, you add up how much an Arab school, elementary school, receives per head, per student, and add up how much a Jewish school, an equal size Jewish school, receives per head. A Jewish student gets 6 times more support from the state than an Arab student. I mean,
this is
this is now, not in 1970.
That's right. This tells me that already the system of apartheid there is structural. You know, I mean,
Very much so.
Refined laws, etc. We've seen those like with the French in Algeria. We've seen those in South Africa. We've seen them in many other occupied areas or where there are minorities being oppressed, repressed in their own homeland.
I may just give an example because you asked me about the medical example.
Right.
Okay, this is back then when we first went back. Okay, the hospital that serves our area, the catchment area from which the patients come to this hospital, the Nahariya Hospital. The catchment area is 2/3 Arabic and 1/3 Jewish. Okay. I interfered personally, and the mayors of several of the villages around, begging to have one employee in the emergency room who speaks Arabic, so that patients arriving who couldn't speak Hebrew could find their way around. And that was not to be. Okay, so I mean, you can see how built in the discrimination is.
And it's interesting, you know, talking about these barriers and checkpoints in 1970, and this is after the martial law ended in Israel in 1966. Military for the Arabs only. So, but still, you had those kinds of checkpoints and so on. So it wasn't really hasn't really ended actually. The other thing I wanted to ask you about 1976, right?
Yes.
The Land Day.
So
could you say more about it? Because I mean, here we have like someone like Ilan Pape talking about ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948, and he proves it from Israeli documents and so forth, that there was really ethnic cleansing of the, and it was like deliberate, planned, and so forth. But then that ethnic cleansing seems to me, with the Land Day issue, which you're going to explicate, had been ongoing, and still it's ongoing through the laws that Israel uses against the Palestinians, its own citizens, against the Palestinians, so to try and limit their development, the village development, etc. So could you say something about Land Day and its origins?
Okay, well, I said earlier that in 1976 we came here for 2 years.
Right.
That was because of Land Day, actually.
Yes.
In 1976, in 1948, okay, there was the Nakba, the catastrophe that befell the Palestinians, and 750,000 became refugees. We were the lucky few that remained in our land. But that was a problem for the state, because the state wanted the land. The issue, the basic issue, is an issue of land, like all colonial schemes.
Yes.
How do you take away the land of this native population that remained on its land? And so the state had devised a total of 36 different laws by which the state can confiscate private land. And private land in Israel means Palestinian land, because the land in Israel is owned in perpetuity by the state for the benefit of the Jews only. So any land that the state takes, it's not for all of its citizens, it's all for Jewish
citizens.
20% of the citizens don't benefit from that. Okay, so there was a massive plan or plan for massive confiscation of Palestinian privately owned land, especially in the Galilee and also in an area called the Triangle, and in the south, the Negev, Negev Desert. People receive notices that your land in this or that location is no longer used as state land because of low number, this or that. And everybody decided, that's everybody, the Palestinian community decided, they, for the first time ever since Israel was established, they stood together and decided to say, no, we don't want this to happen to us. We're going on a strike for one day. For that reason, the Prime Minister at the time, Yitzhak Rabin, and the Defense Minister, Shimon Peres, they sent in the troops, not the police, but the crack troops with tanks and with the half-tracks and into the villages to stop us from
demonstrating.
From striking.
Striking,
no
striking, I'm sorry.
From striking.
Yeah.
We don't want to go to work. So you send in the army to, and they had I think maybe Didi remembers what it was like, and on the spot there we decided we are not staying. So maybe you can.
I can just relate about how frightening it was, because, well, I had never seen soldiers come in and put us under curfew, and here we got up in the morning and looked out our window, and there was a half-track and soldiers there and waving their weapons. And during that first morning period, we were all frightened because we didn't understand what was going on at first. Then it became clear that, we're not to leave our houses, because anyone who tried to look out the door or out the window, they were shouted at, and somebody would raise a weapon and shake it at you. And
or shoot.
Yeah.
There were
6 people killed. Right. And
no, what I wanted to say, like, since that day became commemorated every year, wherever there's a Palestinian, anywhere from Argentina to Hawaii to wherever.
That's right.
That became a very important day for Palestinians everywhere.
That's why the village where we live still, Arabi, and the 2 neighboring villages, Sahnin and Deir Hanna, are known as the Land Day Triangle, because that's where it started.
Yes. The other thing is interesting to me is that someone like Jimmy Carter writes a book called Israel, Peace or Apartheid, and he was simply criticizing Israeli practices in the Palestinian occupied territories, not in the areas where the State of Israel was created in 1948, because as far as the State of Israel is concerned, he thinks that it is democracy. There's a democracy there, but he doesn't relate any of those kinds of discriminatory practices, apartheid practices already. So I just want to point that out in terms of the narrative that even somebody like Carter, who wants some kind of a peaceful solution, he is limited in what he can do and what he can say because of the pro-Israeli lobby here, and even with his book that was limited only to the occupied territories, he was really vilified by those Zionists who have a lobby here that really control a lot of what can be said and cannot be said in this country.
Well, I really respect President Carter highly, but I think on that issue he's wrong. That's why I sent him a copy of my book.
Yes. Well, actually, he knows. I mean, he should know.
He knows, but
but
he
it's always
doesn't
good to
express it.
remind him, or to remind people about those kinds of issues, and not take it, just like on face value that Israel is the only democracy and all this kind of baloney, basically, as President Reagan would have said on that issue.
And of course, the excuse for anything that the state wants to do to the Palestinian minority citizens in Israel, the excuse is always security.
Yes, of course.
We have never really done anything to threaten the security of the state, but we are considered, by definition, we are security threat, by definition.
Yeah.
And, the fact is that, for example, issues that have nothing to do with security are somehow dealt with from a security narrow point of view. For example, employment. You look in the daily newspaper about advertisement of positions that are open for people to apply for, and there's always at the bottom a little line that says you must have served in the army to qualify.
Which means,
which means that excludes us.
Yes.
Yeah, because we are not required by law to serve in the armed forces, and we are not. If we want to volunteer, then we go to a special unit. And but the fact is that from becoming a pilot or making ice cream, you have to have
Chocolate, the chocolate factory.
Chocolate factory. Why? Because the army eats chocolate, and therefore that's a security issue.
Ah, okay.
So,
yeah, so it becomes ridiculous.
You can take it to a ridiculous limit.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a caller, Barbara from IAEA. So you're on the air, Barbara.
Dr. Kana'aneh and Mrs. Kana'aneh, I want to thank you very much for speaking to us and from your heart, so obviously from your heart. I would like to ask you, please, to let us know, as citizens of Hawaii, citizens of the United States, what can we do to help our government understand the situation as it truly is, and what can we do to help bring a just peace into this land that we call holy, the Israel and the occupied territory? What can we do?
Yeah. Thank you,
very
Barbara.
much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You want to know?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll try my best to answer that because that's a difficult question, actually. But the only thing I can imagine an American citizen being able to do in this on this subject is to be involved in as much as possible. There are opportunities for people to come and have alternative tours to the Holy Land and to Israel, and see for yourselves, and then try and really repeatedly, in as much as possible, speak about it to your community and, of course, to your representatives in the Senate and in the Congress, so that they learn from you and not from from the standard sources.
Standard issue narrative.
Standard issue narrative, but they learn from you who have seen it, who have been there, and can tell them the other side of the story.
Yeah.
Today, actually, I spoke to, or a lady spoke to me, June Shimukawa, and a good friend, and she asked the same question. And she essentially answered her own question by saying that she was involved in the past with the boycott movement against South Africa. And at the time, the motto was, keep your eyes on South Africa. And I think that is an appropriate motto now, keep your eyes on Palestine. You have to think about this one. There is an increasingly not quite popular, but increasing in number, a movement of boycotting Israel and divestment, so that those kinds of activities do have even more effect than political, just speaking about the issue.
There's a movement just beginning, like trying to have the Israel ousted from the UN, because Israel has never respected any of those UN resolutions, and I don't see any troops going there and trying to enforce those kinds of resolutions.
Well, that's at the political level, of course, again. But I think at the practical level, the BDS, the boycott, divestment, and the sanctions, that is very much more effective to my mind.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's true. So this is an important issue. Now, I want to, because there's quite a bit of confusion, which you successfully tried to put to rest in terms of the difference between Israel 1948 and the occupied territories, etc. But there is something that I want to show on my laptop here, and it is a map of the atrocities that occurred in Gaza in December 2008, January 2009. And the reason for this, not so much only because of what happened, the atrocities that happened in Gaza, which was like genocide by any standard, but also because of the relationship between the Palestinians of what we call ad-dakhil, the interior, which means where Israel was created, and the Palestinians elsewhere, whether they are in the occupied territories or elsewhere. And also something we talked about earlier, not on the show, but before that, as to what Palestinians inside of Israel are thinking about regarding this one. So I want to show a few things to show the atrocities of that, as to what happened. And then we can comment on it and see, like someone from ad-dakhil, from the interior, what you think about that. Here is Israeli assault on Gaza. And by the way, this map is prepared by a number of sources: Amnesty International, BBC, B'Tselem, which is the Israeli human rights organization. It's an Israeli Jewish organization. City Mayors, The Economist, The Guardian, Human Rights Watch, Jewish Virtual Library, PASIA, PCBS, PCHR, UNRWA, which is the United Nations arm, and UN OCHA, which is also a United Nations arm. Okay, so the legend here is that how many bombs had fallen on Gaza from December 27th till January 12th, December 27th, 2008 till January 12th, 2009. So this is the intensity of strikes per square kilometer. And then here is the density of the population, how many people died altogether, how many women have children of those, and the total injured. So we just give you, this is the map of Gaza. We cannot put it all at once on on the monitor, but anyway. So just to give you an idea, I'll start from the top here. Like in this area alone, there's 17,000 per 1 square kilometer. This is the population density. And so per 1 square kilometer, you had 18 bombs fall on that part. And then those bombs and Israeli operations killed 311 people in that area alone. And 118 of those women and children, and 753 injured, you know, just to give you an idea. And so the next one here is the population density per square kilometer is 17,691, and 8.6 bombs per square kilometer fell on that district here. 309 dead, 67 of them men, women and children, and 405 injured total, like men, women, children. Okay, and so just to give you an idea about the Israeli atrocities and the continuation of ethnic cleansing here. Now, I want to ask you, how did that kind of barbaric attack on a population in such a small area, how did that grab the Palestinians inside of Israel? And what did they do to try and like voice their opinion about that?
Okay. In fact, it just so happened that I was not there in Israel during this onslaught, but I came back shortly after, at the end of January. And I mean, the sense of the community, the Palestinian community within Israel, the citizens of Israel proper. We are not talking about the occupied territories. Is, first of all, there was an almost complete disconnect from the Jewish majority. People stopped going to work. They didn't dare go to work. They stopped, I mean, any communal contact that existed pretty much came to a standstill. That's one. The second thing that you heard all the time is really not only, you know, solidarity and for that you went out and there were demonstrations and there were especially in the city of Nazareth and in our villages. But more importantly, there was a sense of real fear for our own future, in that people started looking at what's happening and saying, this is with a nod from Europe and the United States. Nobody's doing anything about it. For 22 days, this went on day in and day out. The killing and the destruction and nobody did anything. Meaning we are also dispensable. And Israel does have, the Israeli government, especially the armed forces, they have what they call a contingency plan. They call it a drawer plan. In the fact, it is in a drawer, and you just have to take it out and use it. Contingency plan for getting rid of us in the case, and in case there is a war with one of the neighboring states, especially with Syria, where we are very close, or with Lebanon. That's why we were very afraid of what happened in 2006 also.
Yes.
Because every time that happens, the possibility is there, because there is known to be a plan for, under the cover of war, pushing us out.
Yeah.
Well, this, after Gaza, it wasn't really so much the fear of being pushed out, but the fear of being
wiped out.
Eliminated. And that became very real. And people expressed that between themselves to the press. But of course, in Israel, and most of those countries, the press doesn't carry that kind of message.
Yeah, yeah. This is very interesting. I mean, because it relates to Palestinian lives, on a daily basis inside Israel. I have a problem with the terminology here because I would like to use something else, another term which is more accurate. But anyway. But what I want to, in terms of ethnic cleansing, I mentioned Ilan Pape, who's an Israeli professor of history, etc. He was really threatened in Israel, so he just left, and he's now in Exeter, in England, in Exeter. So it's interesting that he documented, as I mentioned before, the ethnic cleansing here. But here is another ethnic cleansing situation. The threat that the Palestinians inside of Israel are under, especially with, as you mentioned, Avigdor Lieberman and Netanyahu and all these fascists, in fact. Okay, but what I want to do here is, in fact, I want to show something on my laptop here. I just have it here. And this is, says, I want to tell the world a story, okay? I want to tell the world. Okay, you can read it, but... these are Israeli democratic practices. This is Gaza, by the way. But it could have been anywhere. It could have been Lebanon 2006 in July. Yeah, it could have been anywhere.
Jenin.
Yeah, Jenin. Yeah, Jenin 2002, another massacre. Right. Yeah. So that's the purity of arms that the Israeli offense forces talk about. Proud soldier. These are horrific photos. That's why I wanted to show them. Show that how our tax dollars, what happens to our tax dollars. With somebody like Avigdor Lieberman, he can justify doing this because he makes, in their narrative, in the Zionist narrative, they make the Palestinians subhuman. Therefore, it's okay to kill them and wipe them out. That's the goat that wasn't milked. So this is the continuation of ethnic cleansing, like from 1948 on. About a football that wasn't kicked. And the key is a symbol here. Many Palestinians who left in 1948, they still have the key.
Yes.
The symbol, to their homes. And there's internal displacement also, like Palestinians who live in Haifa, for instance, were kicked out of their home so that Israeli Jews can live in there, and then those Palestinians see their home every day, but they cannot get there. They live somewhere else.
There is about a third of the Palestinian minority in Israel proper are internal refugees, but Israel has named them a special name. Present absentees.
Absentees, right. Yeah. They're present absentees, and that's why they can confiscate
their land,
their
homes, and
not only
and
the
their
assets,
bank accounts, and everything that they own was confiscated. But this is back to Gaza.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, but it could be anywhere where Israelis operate. Like shredded the Quran. Look at this lady.
Yeah. He met her.
About a lie that wasn't discovered. I mean, Gas the Arabs, Jewish Defense League over there. So one would think they would know better.
Yeah.
Muhammad is... Those guys, if you show Palestinians, parents showing their kids machine guns, oh, they are terrorists. But these guys, they must be protecting themselves from terrorists. In 1989, like in Tiananmen Square, there was this guy. It was became a famous photo, which was one Chinese guy in front of a tank. But this one, like a little kid in Palestine, that never was shown on CNN and Fox News and the rest of it. So, chance to see it here. There's another guy. Yeah, I just wanted to show this one. Yep, so we have some time still, like 1 minute. 1 minute we have. So we just, any final thoughts, Didi, in this 1 minute?
It's just that things haven't changed for the better in all the years that we've lived there. We went back in 1917, we're talking about 2009, a new millennium, and it seems like the world closes its ears to what's going on. Just doesn't, I can't say that it doesn't care, but it believes the story that Israel puts out. And only when people come and they see what's going on, then they change their minds at seeing and believing. Because some of them say, no, you couldn't be telling the truth.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lie. Come and see for yourself.
Right, yeah.
And visit.
And there are a number of Israelis like Pape and other, like
Sure.
there's Yoram Bedur,
Susan.
who was who's a journalist, Israeli journalist, Jewish. He dressed up like an Arab, and he like related all the discrimination that Arabs are subjected to, Arabs who are Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book, it says My Enemy Myself, you know, by Yoram Bedur,
And
like
Gideon Levy.
1989. And Gideon Levy is another one. So there's a lot of more people who have that. Yeah, so we're practically flat out, yeah. And well, I'd like to thank you, both Didi and Hatim, for coming over and sharing with us some of the things, so that will be like part of, you know, something that to counter the dominant narrative that designers have in this country and elsewhere. Thank you very
for
much,
letting us here.
and see you in September, because we're gonna take a break in the summer. Yeah, so mahalo, mahalo no welua. Hello.